She had been trying to find the words for 11 weeks. 11 weeks of the right phrase arranged and then put away. 11 weeks of mornings in which she had come to the breakfast table and looked at her husband across the silver and the china and the candlelight and opened her mouth and said nothing. Because nothing was safer than the thing she had to say, and the thing she had to say was going to end something. She was not yet certain what it would end. She was not yet certain whether ending it was the same as destroying it. She had been living inside that uncertainty for 11 weeks, and it had become, by February, the most exhausting thing she had ever carried. Her name was Margaret, and she was the Duchess of Caldwell, and she was with child. She was with child by a man who had told her 12 years ago, across a different table, in a different house, that he would never give her one. He had not said it cruelly. Edward Ashby, the Duke of Caldwell, her husband of 8 years, was not a cruel man. He had said it with the specific guarded honesty of a man who had been carrying a medical verdict for 7 years already and had decided that the woman he was about to marry deserved to know it, before the marriage rather than after. He had said, "I want to be honest with you. A physician told me when I was 25 that I am not able to father children. The condition is permanent. I have had 2 other physicians confirm it since." He had said it, looking at her directly, his hands on the table, nothing managed or arranged about it. And she had received it the way she received most things, Edward told her. As the truth, because he did not lie, and as something she would simply have to live with, because she had already understood, by the age of 22, that life required the accommodation of things one had not chosen. She had accommodated it. For 8 years she had accommodated it. She had mourned it quietly, planned privately, and then folded the mourning away, as she had been taught to do with things that could not be changed. And she had been his wife in every respect that a wife was required to be, and had found, within the life they constructed together, things that were genuinely good. Edward was not a cold man, though he carried himself in the manner of one. He was careful, and he was honest, and he had a quality of attention, when he chose to extend it, that made a person feel that what they were saying was being actually heard. She had loved him in the way of a woman who has built her love from the materials available rather than from the materials she had imagined. And then she had done the thing she had done. She had done it in October, during his parliamentary months, during a period when his correspondence with her had reduced to weekly letters of fond but distant correctness, during a long autumn of standing at windows and feeling that the life she had constructed was adequate in every measurable sense, and that the adequacy itself was, somehow, the loneliest possible condition. She had done it with a man she had trusted, and she had known immediately that it was a catastrophe, and she had said nothing and done nothing, because the doing of it could not be undone. And then November had come, and then December, and with them the thing that was impossible. 3 physicians. She had seen 3 physicians. All 3 had confirmed the same thing. She was with child. She had sat in the 3rd physician's consulting room in a state that she could not have described with available language. Not joy, not grief, not panic, but the particular condition of someone who has received information that her entire understanding of the world does not accommodate. She was with child. Her husband could not father children. These 2 facts existed simultaneously in her body and her life, and they could not both be true, and yet they were both apparently the case. She had 11 weeks to find the words. She had not found them. She had arrived, instead, at the understanding that there were no words adequate to what she had to say, and that the saying would have to be its own instrument, imperfect and insufficient, and necessary, she chose a Tuesday dinner. It seemed to her that the ordinary nature of a Tuesday was itself a kind of mercy. The dinner not arranged as an occasion, no guests, no theatre of significance. Simply Tuesday and the silver and the candles and Edward across the table with the financial papers he had brought from Parliament and was reading between the courses. She waited until the second remove. She set down her fork. She said, "Edward." He looked up from the papers. He had the expression he always had when she interrupted his reading, not impatient, but the expression of a man surfacing from a private depth, arriving at the surface of the room. She said, "I am with child. If this is your first time at Moonlight at Mayfair, welcome. This is a place for stories that do not flinch from the difficult things, and that find, even inside them, the human truth. Subscribe before we go any further. So you are here for what comes next. And if you have been here before, you already know. Settle in. This one is not simple. The silence was complete. Not the silence of a man who has not heard. Edward heard everything, always, with the particular quality of a man who had spent years being precise about information. The silence of a man who had heard, and was holding what he had heard, and was attempting to locate it within a framework that could not contain it. He set down the papers. He looked at her across the table. She did not move. She had decided, in the 11 weeks of preparation, that the only thing she could control in this moment was her own stillness, that she would not perform distress or perform composure, that she would simply be there, present with what she had said, and let him have the moment he required. He said, "That is not possible." "I know," she said. "Margaret." His voice was very even, and she knew what evenness in his voice cost, because she had learned him over 8 years. "I told you before we were married." "Yes," she said. "I have been confirmed by 3 separate physicians." "I know," she said. "I have also been confirmed by 3 separate physicians. The fact stands regardless of the impossibility." A longer silence. She watched him. She watched him do the thing she had been doing for 11 weeks. Hold the 2 facts and find no accommodation for them. And she watched the moment when the accommodation collapsed into something else, something his careful, honest face was not accustomed to carrying. He said, "I need to speak to Dr. Hartley." "Yes," she said. "In the morning." "Yes." He rose from the table. He picked up the papers. He looked at her for a moment, a long, specific look, the look of a man trying to read something that is written in a language he cannot yet identify. He said, "Good night, Margaret." He went. She sat at the table with the second remove cooling before her and listened to his footsteps on the stairs and thought, "It has begun." He went to Dr. Hartley on Wednesday morning. He did not tell Margaret he was going, though she would have known. They had been married 8 years, and she knew the particular quality of his silence over breakfast, when he was managing a course of action he had already decided on. He went without a footman, which was itself unusual, the deliberate privacy of a man conducting an inquiry he did not wish the household to know about. Dr. Hartley was the physician who had given the original verdict. He was older now, 70 perhaps, and received the Duke in the slightly diminished consulting room of a man who had been in practice 40 years and had seen most things, and was not easily startled. The Duke asked him to explain again, in full, what the condition was and what he had said, and what he had meant by permanent. Dr. Hartley listened. He produced the case notes from 11 years ago. He kept thorough notes. This was his professional pride. And he read them, and he was quiet for a considerable time. He said, "Your Grace, when I used the word permanent, I meant that is the evidence at that time suggested." He stopped. He began again. with the specific difficulty of a man who has been precise all his professional life and is arriving at a moment of imprecision. The condition I identified was one of degree rather than of absolute fact, the Latin term. He checked himself. I described it then as a profound difficulty in the usual sense, not an impossibility in every case. The word I used may have been stronger than was entirely supported. The Duke sat very still. "You told me," he said, that there was no possibility. "I told you," Dr. Hartley said carefully, "that the probability was very significantly reduced. The word permanent was. I believe I was endeavouring to prepare you for the likelihood rather than to state a certainty." "I understood it as a certainty," the Duke said. "Yes," the physician said. "I can see that you did." He looked at his notes. "The honest answer, Your Grace, is that the body is not always a document one can read with absolute precision. It is possible, it is not impossible, that over the years since my examination, the condition may have resolved to some degree. It has been observed in such cases." The Duke said, "You are telling me that your diagnosis was not what I understood it to be." "I am telling you, Doctor," Hartley said with the dignity of a man arriving at a difficult truth, "that I may have communicated a certainty I was not, in fact, in possession of, and that if Her Grace is with child, the child may, in the realm of the possible, be yours." The Duke rose. He thanked the physician. He left the consulting room and stood in the February street for a moment, in the cold, looking at nothing. "May be yours." He walked home. He did not go directly to Margaret. This was the thing that would trouble him afterward, that his first instinct had not been to find his wife and speak to her, but to know. He needed to know before he could speak. He needed the truth before he could say anything, because he had built his life on a principle of honesty, and the principle had been founded. He now understood on a medical verdict that was itself imprecise. He went to the library. He sat at the desk, he thought. He had been away from London in October, a parliamentary session that had gone long, that had kept him from Margaret for 7 weeks instead of the usual 5. He had written to her. She had written to him. The letters had been correct and warm, and the letters of 2 people who had learned each other's written voices over 8 years. He had not thought, reading them, that anything was absent. He thought about it now. He thought about the particular quality of her recent manner, the way she had been coming to breakfast, and sitting with a stillness that was not her natural stillness. The way she had looked at him over the months, since October, with an expression he had filed as contentment and was now reviewing. The way she had been carrying something she had not given him, which was not her habit. Margaret was not a concealing woman. She had always given him the truth when he asked for it, and frequently when he had not. He thought, if the child is mine, it is a miracle, and she would have told me sooner, he thought. If the child is not mine, he stopped. He sat with it for a long time. Then he did what he always did when he required information, and could not obtain it directly. He went methodically through what was available to him. He went upstairs to his wife's sitting room, which she had not locked because she did not lock things from him, which was a point he noted. He looked at the correspondence box on her writing desk, the one she used for family letters, the one she had always left accessible. He opened it. The correspondence within was familiar. Letters from her mother, letters from her sister in Bath, a letter from an old friend, a Mrs. Pemberton, chatty and characteristic. He read them with the attention of a man looking for something that was not there, and found what was not there. Any letter, in or out, from James Forest. James Forest was a man he had known for 15 years, a lawyer, a man he had trusted with professional matters and had considered a friend in the loose, social sense of the word. Someone who was present at dinners and shooting parties, and who had always, the Duke now thought with the specific attention of a man reviewing his catalogue of observations with newly sharpened interest, been fonder of Margaret's company than his own. He could not name the moment he had thought this before. It had not been a thought with weight. It had been a peripheral observation, the kind you made in rooms without attending to, the kind that sat in the undexed margins of a man's knowledge of his own life. He left the sitting room. He went to ask the household, carefully and without appearing to ask, a specific question: who had called during October and November during his parliamentary absence? The housekeeper, Ms. Peel, a woman of 30 years' service who answered what she was asked, and nothing more, told him, among others, that Mr. Forest had called in October. Twice in October, once in November. He thanked her. He went back to the library. He did not find letters because there were no letters. This was the thing he had not anticipated. That the evidence he was looking for did not exist in the former evidence. There was no correspondence, no notes slipped between pages, no lock broken or drawer forced. There was nothing, which meant. And he understood the difference, because he was an honest man and honesty required precision, that the absence of evidence was not the same as the evidence of absence. He was sitting with this distinction when Margaret came to the library doorway. She looked at him. She looked at the desk, at the specific quality of a man who has been thinking hard, and for a long time. She looked at her own sitting room door, which was ajar in a way it had not been this morning. She said, "You have been to Dr. Hartley." "Yes," he said. "And," he said, "he told me that his use of the word permanent was more definitive than his understanding warranted." He looked at her. "He said the child may be mine." She sat down, not in the chair across from him, in the chair beside the window, which was where she sat when she was managing something difficult. He knew her chairs the way he knew all her habits, all her arrangements. "Ye, Edward," she said. "Tell me," he said. "Tell me exactly and completely. I will not interrupt." She looked at the window. She looked at her hands. She said, "I need you to understand. I say this not to protect myself. I am past protecting myself, that I had no expectation of this consequence. I did not arrange it. I did not choose it as a strategy. I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest." "Tell me the rest," he said. She told him. She told him about October, the length of his absence, the quality of the silence of the house, the particular condition of a woman who has spent years accommodating an impossibility and who arrived in her 32nd year at a moment of despair she had not known was coming and had not managed as she should have. She told him about James Forest, not in the manner of a woman presenting a case for herself, but in the manner of a woman who has been honest her entire life and has done a dishonest thing and is now giving him the truth of it, which was the only thing she had left to give. She told him it had happened once, that she had understood immediately that it was a catastrophe, that she had not communicated with Forrest since, and that the letters he had not found were not there because there had been no letters. There had been nothing, because she had been too ashamed and too frightened and too clear-eyed about what she had done to extend it into anything further. She told him about the physicians, about the 11 weeks of trying to find words, about the specific, terrible impossibility of knowing that the child she carried might be a miracle or might be a scandal, and having no way, within the available instruments of 1818, to know which, she said. "I do not know whose child this is. I do not know whether your condition resolved, as Dr. Hartley suggests it may have, or whether—" She stopped. She looked at her hands. "The timing is. It is not impossible on either account. The weeks overlap. I cannot tell you with certainty. I do not have the certainty to give you." He was silent for a long time. She did not attempt to fill the silence. She had always understood that Edward required for the things that mattered, that he was not a man who processed difficult truths quickly or outwardly, that what the world read as coldness was, in fact, the deep, slow work of a mind that took everything seriously. He said, "You should have told me before." "Yes," she said, "I should have told you in October. I know that. I chose not to because I could not face what it would cost, and I was wrong to make that choice, and I cannot repair it." He said, "If I had not been wrong about my own condition." "If what, doctor?" "Hartley had told me had been what I understood it to be. You intended to present this child as mine." The sentence sat between them with the full weight of what it was. She did not flinch from it. She said, "When I understood I was with child, I considered it. I will not lie to you about that. I considered whether the overlap of the weeks might permit it. I considered whether the kindness of that to the child, to avoid the alternative, justified the deception." She looked at him. "I decided it did not. That is why I told you. You told me because you had decided the deception was not justifiable. Yes, not because you were discovered." "No," she said, "you had not discovered anything. I told you because I had decided it was wrong to let you believe it." She paused. "I know that is not." She stopped. "I know it does not restore what has been damaged. I am not offering it as mitigation. I am offering it as the truth," he said. "I need time." "Yes," she said. He rose. He went to the door. He stopped. He said, "James Forest." "Yes," she said. He said. He knew. When he called in November, he knew. "He may have suspected," she said. "We did not speak of it." He looked at the window. The February light was flat and grey, the particular winter light that offered nothing. He said, "I am going to my club. I will return this evening." She said, "Yes." He left. He walked to the club and did not go in. He stood outside it for a moment in the February cold and thought about James Forest, about the 15 years of professional trust, the dinners, the shooting parties, the man who had always been fonder of Margaret's company, and he felt something that was not the clean anger he might have expected, but the particular complicated anger of a man who has been deprived simultaneously of the clarity of innocence and the clarity of guilt, and who is standing in the grey space between them with no reliable map. He thought about the child. He thought about the child, because it was the thing he had not allowed himself to think about yet. A child. After 8 years of the careful, managed absence of children, after the diagnosis that had been the fixed star of his understanding of his own life, the certainty around which everything else had been arranged, a child, whose child was not determinable by any means available, who existed regardless of the determination. He thought about Margaret's face when she had told him. The specific quality of a woman who has carried something for 11 weeks and has arrived, finally, at the setting down of it. Not relief, not hope, but the particular exhaustion of someone who has been honest at great cost, because dishonesty was finally the worse option. He thought, she told me when she could have not told me. She told me when the weeks overlapped and the chance existed to say nothing and let the child be received as mine without question. She chose to tell me, he thought. That is either the action of a woman who loves the truth more than she loves her own protection, or the action of a woman who loves me more than she loves her own protection. He was not yet certain which. He was not yet certain the distinction mattered. He walked for 2 hours. He walked the streets of Mayfair in the winter light without a particular direction, which was unusual for him, and let the thinking proceed without managing it, which was also unusual. He had spent a great deal of his life managing his thinking, directing it toward conclusions, arranging the available evidence, producing answers from questions with the systematic efficiency he had always considered a virtue. He let it be unmanaged today because unmanaged was what the situation required. He arrived, eventually, at an address in Bloomsbury. James Forrest's address. He had not decided to come here. He was standing outside the door, and he had not decided. He stood for a moment. He went up. Forrest opened the door himself. He saw who it was and went pale. The specific controlled pale of a man who has been expecting this and has not been able to prepare for it adequately. The Duke said, "I am going to say one thing. I do not require your response." Forrest said nothing. He was at least the kind of man who did not pretend he did not know why the Duke was at his door. The Duke said, "My wife told me. She told me of her own decision before I had discovered anything. She told me because she believed it was the correct thing to do." He paused. "I am here to tell you that whatever passed between you was concluded by her in November, and that she has been honest with me about the full account of it, and that my concern is for my wife and for the child and for the marriage, in that order of precedence." He looked at Forrest steadily. "I am also here to tell you that you will not contact her again. Not through correspondence, not through social occasions, not through the intermediary of mutual acquaintances. That is not a request," Forrest said. "Edward, that is not a request," the Duke said again. He said it without performance, which was how he said everything when it mattered. "I am a man who was told by 3 physicians over 12 years that I could not father children. I built my life on that certainty. It was, apparently, less certain than I believed." He paused. "The child my wife carries may be mine. I do not yet know. I intend to return to my wife and conduct myself in accordance with that possibility, which is the only honest position available to me." He looked at Forrest for a long, precise moment. "You have known me for 15 years. I believe you understand that I mean what I say," Forrest said quietly, and with the specific diminishment of a man who has understood the full dimensions of what he has done. "Yes." The Duke left. He stood on the Bloomsbury street and took 2 careful breaths. Then he turned and walked home. He came back at 6 o'clock. Margaret was in the drawing room with a book she had not been reading. She looked up when he came in. The guarded, honest look of a woman who has surrendered all protection and is now simply waiting to receive what arrives. He sat in the chair across from her. He looked at his hands for a moment. Then he looked at her. He said, "I have been to see Dr. Hartley. I have been to see Forrest." He paused. "I walked for some time," she said. "Yes." He said, "I want to say several things, and I want to say them accurately, so I am going to take the time to do so." She said, "Yes." "Please," he said. "What you did in October was a grave injury to this marriage. I do not diminish that. I do not intend to tell you that it was understandable or that I can overlook it or that it did not cause me pain, because all 3 of those things would be dishonest." He paused. "I also do not intend to overlook that I have spent 8 years of this marriage absent in a way that I did not examine sufficiently, because I had built my understanding of what I could give you on a medical verdict that was apparently less absolute than I believed, and I used that verdict as a reason not to be fully present." He looked at her. "That does not excuse what you did. It is simply the full accounting, which is what this moment requires." She was very still. He said, "The child. Whether the child is mine in the biological sense, I cannot know. Not with certainty. Not with the instruments available to us." He paused. "I can know what I choose, and what I choose is this. The child will be raised as my heir, in my house with my name. Because the alternative, the scandal, the legal proceedings, the exposure to the consequences of actions that were not the child's is not something I am willing to provide. Not for the satisfaction of certainty, she said very quietly. Edward, he said, I am not finished. She stopped. He said, I also want to say, and I want to say it clearly, because I have not said it clearly before, and I am beginning to understand that the things I have not said clearly are the source of several of the difficulties between us, that I do not want the marriage that we have had. I want. He stopped. He found the honest form. I want to be present in a way I have not been. I want to attend to what is actually before me rather than to the certainty I constructed 12 years ago and have been living inside of since. He looked at her. I do not know how to do that well. I expect I will do it imperfectly, but I am willing to attempt it. She was crying. Not dramatically. Margaret was not a dramatic woman. She was crying in the contained, precise way of a woman who has been holding something for 11 weeks and has just been told she can put it down. 2 tears, managed, and her posture unchanged, she said. I am sorry, Edward, he said. I know, she said. I do not know whose child it is. I want you to know that I did not. I want you to know that if I had understood when I was 22 that there was uncertainty rather than certainty in what you told me, I would not have. She stopped. I am not saying that to shift the weight of it. Add to basket. I am saying it because I want you to have the full truth, he said. I have the full truth. She looked at him with the specific expression of a woman who has been prepared for the worst and has received something other than the worst and is not yet certain what to do with it, he said. I went to see Forest. I told him what I told him. He will not contact you, she said. Thank you, he said. I did not do it for gratitude. No, she said. I know. He rose. He went to the window and stood looking at the February evening. The gas lamps coming on in the street, the cold light of a winter in which, against every expectation of his carefully managed life, his marriage had arrived at a crisis and had not destroyed itself. He said, I want to ask you something. She said, yes, he said. On the evenings in October when I wrote to you, the letters were warm. They were. I found them warm, reading them over tonight. I want to know whether the warmth was real or whether it was managed to conceal what was happening. A pause, she said. It was real. A pause. And what was happening was also real. Both things were true at the same time. I know that is difficult to believe. He was quiet. He said, I believe it. She looked at him. He said, human beings contain several things at once. I have been overly committed to the single truth, the clean account. I am beginning to understand that the honest account of most situations is more complicated than the clean one, she said. 8 years ago, you would not have said that. No, he said. 8 years ago, I believed in certainty. I had a medical verdict and I arranged my life according to it. He looked at the gas lamps in the street. The verdict was wrong. Not maliciously. It was the honest opinion of a physician doing his best with the instruments available to him. But wrong. He turned from the window. He looked at his wife, at Margaret, who had been beside him for 8 years, and whose face he knew the way, he knew the rooms of the house he had grown up in, with the specific, intimate knowledge of long familiarity that is not always, he thought, the same as seeing. He said, May I sit beside you? She looked at him. He had not asked this in some time, had not asked it because the arrangement of their evenings had become what it had become, the settled distance of 2 people who have organised themselves around an impossibility and stopped pressing against its edges. She moved to one end of the sofa. He sat beside her. They sat for a while in the drawing room in the February evening. She did not reach for his hand, and he did not reach for hers, not yet. They were not at the yet, but they were in the same space, which was more than they had been for some time. and the space was not pretending to be something it was not, which was itself a beginning, she said. Doctor, Hartley told you it may have resolved. He said it was not impossible, the Duke said. He was considerably less confident than he had been 12 years ago. The child could be yours, she said. She said it not as comfort, but as possibility. The real careful possibility of a woman who has been carrying an impossible fact and has been given, unexpectedly, something that might resolve it, he said. It may be. I do not know. I have decided that I cannot live according to what I do not know, only according to what I choose. She looked at the fire, she said. And what do you choose? He said. I told you what I choose. The child is mine. The marriage, Cobb continues. We attempt. He paused. The attempt will require things of both of us that will not be comfortable. Yes, she said. It will require me to be present in ways I have not been. Yes, she said. And it will require you. He said, with the precision of a man who had always communicated through precision, to tell me difficult things when they are difficult, rather than 11 weeks after. Yes, she said. I know, he said. I require honesty, even when the honesty is, especially when the honesty is what tonight was. She said, I understand. She looked at him. I chose to tell you, even knowing what it might cost. I need you to understand that I chose it. I know, he said. It is why we are sitting here rather than elsewhere, she said. Thank you for coming back, he said. I told you I would return in the evening. Yes, she said. You did. She looked at her hands. I wasn't entirely certain you would, he said. I told you I would, she said with the first fragile warmth of the evening. I know. You do not say things you do not mean. No, he said. I do not. They sat in the drawing room as the February evening deepened into night, and the fire was warm, and the distance between them was not gone. It would not be gone for some time, and both of them understood this, but it was different. It was the distance of two people who have had the worst conversation available to them, and have survived it by means of the only instrument that had ever reliably served either of them. The truth, imperfect, complicated, and without the clean certainty of the accounts they had both preferred, but present, fully, uncomfortably, necessarily present. The child, Edward would think of it, in the months that followed, always as the child, without the qualifier he could not resolve, arrived in July. A boy. Dark-haired, with the particular eyes of the Ashby family, which told him nothing precise and everything that he had decided. He held the child in the first hours and found that holding was not the same as knowing, and that he did not, standing in that room, require the knowing in order to feel what he felt. What he felt was large and specific and entirely outside the vocabulary of the careful, managed life he had been living. And he could not have named it except by saying, "This is the thing I arranged. Myself against, for 12 years, and I was wrong to do so, and I will not be wrong about it again." He named the boy Edmund. It was his father's name and his grandfather's name. And it was a name that said, "This child belongs to this family," which was the sentence the Duke of Caldwell had decided to speak, and intended to keep speaking for the remainder of his life. Margaret recovered and, watching him with the child from across the room, said, "Are you all right?" He said, "Yes," she said. "Truly?" He looked at her. He looked at the child. He said, "I told you I would not say things I did not mean," she said. "You did," he said. "Come here." She came. The accounting, in the months and years that followed, was never simple. A marriage damaged by the weight of a long half-truth on one side and a long half-absence on the other did not restore itself in a season. There were evenings that were difficult. There were mornings when the distance reasserted itself. There were moments when Margaret looked at her husband's face and understood that he was carrying something he had not yet given language to. And when the Duke looked at his wife and remembered the quality of the silence she had kept, and neither of them found those moments easy, but they had decided, and they held to the decision with the specific daily effort of two people who had chosen the difficult thing over the comfortable absence, who had found, at considerable cost, that the architecture of honesty was harder to build and more durable than the architecture of arranged certainty, and who were, in the long run and the particular accumulation of ordinary mornings, the better for it. James Forrest left London for the continent in March. Yes, he sent no correspondence. Dr. Hartley retired from practice the following year. He wrote a paper which was circulated among his colleagues about the importance of communicating the distinction between probability and impossibility in the field of natural philosophy and medicine. He did not use names. Edmund Ashby grew up in the house his father had rebuilt around honesty, imperfectly and persistently, and was raised by a man who was present in the way that presence requires effort, and by a woman who had learned that the truth, even when it was the most terrifying option, was the only one with a foundation worth standing on. That was enough. That was more than many had. And perhaps that is why this story stays with us. Not because a secret was kept, or a family was protected by the polished operation of a great name, but because two people looked at the wreckage of what they had built on imperfect information and chose, not without pain, not without cost, not without the long and difficult work of rebuilding, to build again on better ground. She told him the truth when she could have not told him. He came home when he could have not come home. They sat together on a February evening in the specific uncomfortable space of two people who have been honest with each other at great cost. And they decided that the cost was the price of the thing they were building, and that the thing they were building was worth the price. That is not a simple love story. It is not a clean one. It contains failures that were real and wounds that took years to close, and a child who was loved without qualification, because the Duke of Caldwell had decided that love was a decision as much as a feeling, and he was a man who honoured his decisions. Some of the truest things are the least clean. Some of the most durable loves are built not from the original timber, but from what was salvaged after the fire, and are stronger for the salvaging, because salvaged things have been tested, and the testing showed what held.
If you believe that real love is not arranged but discovered, subscribe to Moonlight at Mayfair and return for the next story beneath the soft light of the evening star. Moonlight at Mayfair, where every love is hard won and every ending is deserved.